So let's say you don't do your yoga practice. You have a plan to do some yoga at home or maybe to take a yoga class, and then you don't do it. What I'd like to talk about today is how we can use yoga practice and the teachings of yoga to help us navigate this very common scenario. When you don't do your practice, and I say when, not if, because it happens sometimes for most of us, right? When you don't do your yoga practice, this is a really important opportunity to apply some of the teachings of yoga and a yoga therapy process so that we can continue to move towards health and well-being, right? So, the first thing that's really important when you miss your yoga practice is to notice your thoughts and feel your feelings. When you notice that you've missed practice, or maybe you go to your session and you meet with your yoga therapist and you have to say, hey, I didn't practice this week. Notice the thought patterns that come up in your mind, okay? Most of us will have patterns and repeating patterns or grooved patterns of thought that we fall into regularly. So notice what you think. When you realize that you haven't done your practice, what do you think about it? What do you think or believe about yourself and what you should be doing? What do you think and believe about yoga practice and what that should look like? Notice what is there in your patterning around the idea of practice. And then as you're paying attention to these thoughts, notice the emotions that arise as you identify with the thoughts. And this is really important. Notice where those emotions reside in your physical body, because even emotional feeling has a physical resonance, so you will feel it somewhere in your body. Those sensations will have a certain quality to them. And then feel those feelings rather than following the chain of thoughts, identifying with the thoughts, taking those further and further where they're leading you. Let the thoughts come up, see them for what they are, and then feel the emotional resonance in your body and stick with that feeling. And notice what happens as you feel the feelings that come along with the thoughts. This is a really essential piece of the practice because the thought patterns that recur and the emotional patterns that come along with them are sometimes just as much what stands in our way of successfully committing to a practice that works for us and that supports our health and well-being as any kind of outside influence. Okay, so it's really important, maybe the most important, that we take the opportunity to work in the inner landscape and to understand what's going on inside that relates to our practice and whether we did it or not, right? Understanding that whole situation. The more you can come to the situation with curiosity and kindness, the easier it is to get clear on what's really happening and then to move forward with making some adjustments or some refinements that are helpful for you. Okay? So once you've started doing the work of noticing the thoughts and feeling the feelings, maybe some of those feelings as you feel them are starting to dissipate and move through rather than being stuck and held on to. Then sit down and make a list of all the reasons that got in the way of practicing. And if you can, think about this as a brainstorm. So when we brainstorm, there's no bad ideas. Everything goes on the list. Everything has equal value. Okay? If you get stuck in your own judgments and your own emotions, go back to the first step. Stop, notice your thoughts, notice your beliefs, feel your feelings. Okay? what will happen is you'll end up with a list of things that stand in the way of you practicing. And as you do this process, you might find that more and more stuff comes to the surface and is able to be put on that list. Some of these reasons might seem really silly to you. We tend to disparage those as excuses. I encourage you to let those be on the list, to notice your thoughts and feelings about them, and then to really come to the list with the assumption that all of your reasons are good reasons, because I assume you're doing this process because you want to do your yoga practice. And if you want to do your yoga practice and you didn't do it, I'm going to assume that your reasons were good reasons. Your obstacles were real obstacles. It's a very generous way of looking at it. And it also is, the more I do this work, it feels like a very true way of looking at it, right? So some of these obstacles, though they seem small, we actually just don't have the capacity to get past them, right? So they really become larger obstacles than they seem, but they might be easy to remove. And I'll give you an example from my own life. I came to realize that one of the things that stopped me from doing my practice was thinking that I needed to change into yoga clothes, especially in the winter when it's a little colder, or just in general feeling like I needed to go and do that task. That was stopping me from taking the 5 minutes that I had free in my schedule and doing some meditation or some yoga during that time. And then when I thought about it, there's really no reason for me to be changing in that amount of time that I had to practice. It wasn't like I was getting sweaty. It wasn't like I needed to do any kind of dramatic range of motion activities. I just needed to come onto my mat and come into myself for a little while. And so I just started practicing without changing. And lo and behold, I was practicing every day. So sometimes there are really simple things like that that you can make changes with. Okay? Sometimes it's a little more complicated. So sometimes we discover that we are really, really busy or really tired and don't feel well. And we may need to make some adjustments either to what we think practice should look like so that it is easier and simpler and more manageable for us, or that we need to add some kinds of support and structure around practice in our life to make that actually possible for us. So I talked a little bit about this idea last week of making the practice so easy that your success is guaranteed. This becomes really important as you're looking at this list of things that stand in your way in starting to build a successful practice. So if you haven't watched that video, you can go back and watch that one as well. If you'd like more personal support, I encourage you to reach out to someone who can support you with this process, because sometimes it helps to have another pair of eyes looking at what's going on and helping to guide you through it. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them in the comments, and I hope this is really helpful.